Hi, this is Ronika Wahi. I'm back with another interview. This time it's with Pakistani American writer Soniah Kamal. It's a truth universally acknowledged that an Austen fan will want to grab an acclaimed copy of an adaptation or retelling of one of her works. Accordingly, then, I put Unmarriageable on my long to be read list and finally read it in December last year. So it's a fun novel retake on the Jane Austen classic, and it's very importantly it's a feminist retake, and so it's because it's in a totally different setting. It runs like a different kind of a story, despite the fact that we are all too familiar with the plot. So you can read my detailed review on the book on my book review blog. It's ronikavahi.blogspot.com. The exact link I am adding in the description box of this video, so you can check it out. Just to give a brief glimpse into Sonia Ji's profile, of course, she's won a lot of acclaim for Unmarriageable, Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan. Her first novel, An Isolated Incident, also got a lot of good reviews and was shortlisted for a couple of awards as well. She also writes essays and short stories and is a public speaker. Her TEDx talk is very interesting. It talks about how she started writing basically, and about how one mustn't hesitate from grabbing second chances in life. And she also runs an interview series called Drunk on Ink. So thank you, first of all, Sonia Ji, for agreeing for this interview. It's a great pleasure to be able to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Ronika, for that generous introduction. Look forward to speaking with you.
Okay, so the first thing that I want to ask you about is the covers of your book. So,
okay.
So there is this, Pride and Prejudice, very iconic cover of 1894 by Hugh Thompson, right? Which has this peacock on it, and it's become this very so to say symbolic of the themes of this book, right? Love, courtship, wealth, beauty, elegance, all of that. And then the first cover of your book also, that teal one has peacocks. Then this edition that I have, the UK one, also has peacocks. And then there's another cover that I've seen with the man and the woman. They're representing the way you fashioned your protagonists. So do tell us more about these covers and the story behind them.
Okay, so as you mentioned, the red cover you have is the UK version. This is the hardback version in the US. As you can see, yes, it does have the peacocks. When Penguin Random House, who are my publishers in the US, asked me for my input in the cover, I said, actually going back to the Hugh Thompson iconic cover, I said I wanted peacocks in some way, shape or form, and that I wanted no faces on the cover. And actually, I chose this color. They'd given me a lot of options with the colors, and I went with this this particular color scheme. And then, like I said, funny enough, my one thing had been, please do not give me any heads on the cover or faces on the cover or anything. So then they gave me this for the paperback. So we went a bit back and forth on this because I love the colors. I love the green and the white and the red and stuff. However, I'm not too fond of faces on covers myself, really. So so this wasn't necessarily my vision of my main characters, but this is what they gave me, and as they say, marketing knows best. So like writers everywhere, I learned to be happy with the cover that I was given. It's a nice cover, it's a very pretty cover, but you know, so I made sure that Alice here has short hair. Actually, she has even shorter hair in the novel, but this was the shortest we sort of went with. And then there's sunglasses, and I made sure that the earring looked more as Pakistani or as desi as I could, you know, have it made, rather than something from the 1920s. So from the Roaring Twenties sort of look, and she's wearing a kurti and stuff, and then they have the Lahore skyline at the bottom. So I was happy with this. I'm happy with this cover. And then and as you can see here, there are no peacocks on this cover at all. So, but then for the large print, the US large print, we went with peacocks again, and I absolutely love this cover. In fact, it's very reminiscent of all three of the Hugh Thompson cover, because that really is just a peacock tail, is what the Hugh Thompson cover is. And that's what I'd wanted to allude to in the beginning when we my publishers and I had discussed covers. And so this is a lovely cover. This is the large print for, those who need a larger print in order to read comfortably. So I'm very happy with all of these. And then the audiobook, I narrated the audiobook in the US myself, which was a fluke, but I'm very glad I did it. But the audiobook, I'm not sure. I think it has the blue cover. I'm not really sure what cover that has. But they didn't do any special cover for audiobooks, I think. They just choose one of the covers. So yeah, that's the cover story.
Yeah. So okay, there is this a section in your book which I found really interesting. After the novel ends, you put this additional section, Pride and Prejudice and Me, where you talk about your engagement with Austen. So there you've mentioned how it was reading Austen that first made you think critically about a patriarchy, and then you also began to see similarities between Regency England and the Pakistan that you know. So, but what made you finally decide to actually sit down and write this book? Because this idea had been there, right, in your mind. But how did you finally decide?
It's not. It's such a mishmash of stuff. And when at least I'm asked where the ideas came from, how they manifested, there are lots of ideas and thoughts which we all have at any age.
Right.
And so there's no real, date or for me particular, that on this day at this time, this is what happened. I read, I was given Pride and Prejudice as a gift from an aunt of mine when I was 12, 13. And I read actually, it's this one right here. This is the one I have, and I'm sorry to say it's falling apart, but I've had it for a while. So this is what I was given on one of my birthdays. I think I was 12 or 13, and it, looked very thick. And I read the first line, and I was like, I'm not reading this. I don't know what she's saying. But what my edition had was, oh, sorry, it's falling apart. Is these pictures. Called color plates. So I was very fascinated by these pictures, and I'd go through them, every so often. And then one day, I think I was 15, 16, 17, I don't really remember. I just sat down and clearly understood the first line, and I just read it chapter to chapter till the end. And as I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is just like Pakistani society, the same sort of class issue, status anxiety, the stress on marriage, and especially girls, not just getting married, but also getting married, period, but trying to get married as well as possible. And I could see her characters all around me, the mother character, of course, the difference was in Regency England, all women of this certain particular class that Austen writes about could get married. They couldn't get jobs, they for financial security, they had to get married. And my mother's a doctor. So obviously I knew that in Pakistan, financially, things are very different for women. If you have the advantage and the privilege to get an education and then work and stuff, you can make your own income. So I'd grown up in a family like that. But the pressure to get married was always there, very much there. You can be as educated as you want, but you have to get married. So these things really, really resonated with me. And back in the day, there was I've grown up in the English language strata of Pakistan, and there was no book set in Pakistan written in English, at least that I could find, which addressed these issues for my age group, so to speak, or whatever. And I was a huge reader. So this novel really resonated with me. And when you're a child or when you're a teenager, when you're young, every book you read, you want to see a movie made of it, or you want to see something, And but I'd also, because there was no book written in English, what I'd started doing from an earlier age was whatever I'd read, I'd sort of transpose it into Pakistan, or at least my culture. So if someone's eating, I don't know, a scone, I turn it into a samosa, you know, stuff like that, just to make it more familiar. Bonnets into dupattas. So it wasn't such a leap for me that when I read this, that I thought this is just like, I mean, for me, Austen was Pakistani. She didn't know it, obviously, but she, you know, she was Pakistani, or what in the US is often referred to as South Asian, which has its own you know, problematic things with when we label one big group as being similar. But as you mentioned my TEDx talk, as you know, I never meant to be a writer. I meant to be an actress, and unfortunately, because I come from a respectable Muslim background, that was taboo for me. A huge regret to this day, probably forever. That I, you know, I didn't have back in the day. You couldn't just leave home and do what you wanted. It's much easier now to follow your dreams in many respects. Back in that time, there was nowhere you could go. Where would you go? And so it so happened then that when I was older, I happened to be reading on my own this speech by Thomas Babington Macaulay, who in 1835 had addressed British Parliament and said that English should replace all the languages across British Empire and become the official language. And having grown up, like I said, in the English language system in Pakistan, etc., to see this foundation of the language that is mine and the language I think in, speak in, etc., was very, very disorienting. And I started doing my own research and learned about, colonialism and linguistic colonialism. And in 1947, when the Indian subcontinent was split into India and Pakistan retained English as one of its official languages. So English is a Pakistani language also. So, but yet it continued to be used now as a language of class divides and status consciousness and stuff. And I wanted that to reflect in Unmarriageable also. So I wanted to write having grown up in English and thereby having grown up in British literature, which could also and is Pakistani literature by dint of history, as uncomfortable as that history may be, Austen, Hardy, Donne, etc. These are the, Foster, these are the authors I grew up with, and they were very much my authors. But what I did want to do was take a classic written in English and reset it, reorient it, set it in Pakistan as something that, honestly, in many respects, right back to empire, to reorient it, but to fuse the language I'd grown up in, culture I'd grown up in. And just Pride and Prejudice seemed to be the best one, because as soon as I read it, I was like, this is Pakistan, this is Pakistani. So that's how that came about. But I call it my post-colonial parallel retelling, because it is parallel. It follows the plots and all the characters of Pride and Prejudice, and all the characters are there also. But it has new characters also. It's very much a Pakistani take of the original, and and it's a standalone novel. If you have no knowledge of Austen, if you've never read or seen Pride and Prejudice, that was the challenge actually, which was to write a retelling, but also write a novel, which if you'd never come across Austen or any of her works or anything, you would still be able to read Unmarriageable. So that was a bit of a challenge actually, juggling those two things. But yeah, so that's how the novel came about.
As we're talking about how you imagine these things to be Pakistani, I was reminded of that thing you wrote, right? Jane Khala. So I kept imagining Jane Austen as this Khala sitting and, trying to, it's a Mufat Khala, just saying it as it is, right? Commenting on just about everything and everybody.
Yes. Yes. And we see that more in her letters, or in the letters that have survived her. She was very sharp. She was very observant. She was full of irony and wit, and she really had her pulse on human psychology. And I think a lot of authors do. Authors, in so many respects, when you have to step into the shoes of characters, and if you're a good author, your characters are never all evil or all good. They all have shades of what it is to be human. And Austen really captures that, which I think is part and parcel of her longevity. And what she also does, she doesn't moralize in her fiction. She lets the reader decide which character is good or bad, meaning which character do you want to root for, or Yeah, very much a Jane Khala. I don't know. She seemed that way to me. You know, Khala meaning auntie and all the shades of auntie that go into it. But, you know, she reminded me a bit of me also. I have that Bhat Khala in myself a bit too. So.
Okay, so your TEDx talk, I like that phrase you used to talk about your writing. You called it a consolation prize, right? Because you wanted to be an actor and then you had to choose writing. But you'd also been already writing for a number of years,
You
right?
know,
So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
yes, what I wanted to know was when, can you recall like, at some point of time or maybe some incident that made you appreciate the value of the written word when you were young?
I appreciate the value of the written word because books have brought me up. Books are my parents. In fact, I try not to meet too many authors or whatever of my favorite books because I try to separate the art from the artist. I do, you know, and for me that has become a little more important in the world we live in. But books literally, they brought me up. Books, films also. I was a huge film buff. I watched a lot of films. In fact, I would say my entire politics are shaped by 3 Indian films. Back in the day, they used to be called Indian films and not Bollywood. But so I was always reading and I was always watching, and I just love these two mediums. Consolation prize, because like I said, when I was 12 years old, 12, 13, again, very young, I watched Umrao Jaan, the Indian version. And as you know the story, you know, in it, a dark complexioned girl and a light complexioned girl are kidnapped, and the dark complexioned girl is sold into brothel prostitution, and the light complexioned one ends up being a married wife. And it's the story of the girl who turned into a prostitute. And at the end of the film, she ends up at her mother's house, her childhood house, and she recognizes it, and her brother banishes her because she's something about that movie just. I grew up on a lot of films and stuff, but something about that just gripped me. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be an actress, you know. I would practice dancing all the time after that. I just switch on whatever and copy the actresses dancing and everything. So I have a lot of teachers when it comes to dancing. But you know, my mother came home that day from the hospital, and I told her, very excited, that I know what I want. Literally, I remember the scene. There was sun coming in from the window, and I said, I know what I want to do. I want to be an actress. And she one slap, and she was like, you know, your father will die. And it's like, you know, so the concept immediately of acting and shame, or that I'd said something shameful which would impact everyone, it was just so immediate to me. But you know, the thing is, the sort of person I was, I suppose, I don't know why, but instead of saying, oh yes, you know, this is shameful, I shouldn't do this will upset my parents and this will upset society and the world will collapse, instead I was like, okay, well, I don't know why it's shameful, nothing shameful about it, I'm going to do it. So, you know, and so I would practice dancing secretly and all sorts of things. And I did end up getting some movie offers and lots of TV offers and stuff. But like I said, back in the day, I even tried to run away, but there was nowhere to go. So I came back home. So, you know, but reading, I'd always been reading, you know, back in the day, and even now, kids who read, like whether it's comic books, what are now graphic novels, or, you know, but back in the day, Archie comics, Enid Blyton and Judy. And because I'd grown up in Saudi Arabia and I went to an international school there, I was in the library bookshelves over there. There were books from everywhere: Canada, Australia, England, US, and then kids from different countries. If something wasn't on the library, for instance, I grew up reading Amar Chitra Katha comics because a lot of my Indian friends would bring them in. My Russian friends would bring in comics about Baba Yaga. There would be folk tales, lots of stuff. So my exposure to reading was huge, rather than had I just grown up in England or America or Pakistan, where it would have just been UK centric or US centric.
Right.
Of course, when you're a child and you're growing up, you don't realize that. You know, you don't realize. And same with TV. I grew up on American shows and British shows and Indian movies and Pakistani dramas and Egyptian dramas, and you know, because it was Saudi Arabia, all sorts of things which clearly had an impact on me in some way, shape, and form. But for me, as I say in my TEDx talk, writing, I mean, if you're a reader, that doesn't mean you're going to become a writer, right? writing was just, I was a storyteller. Like I would write dramas, and I would gather friends and say, you're this part and you're this part, you know. So I like to tell stories. But for me, storytelling was really like singing in the shower. You know, people sing in the shower, people sing in the car, antakshari, karaoke. Not everyone says now we're going to become a professional, you know. It's just fun. It's just a hobby. That's what storytelling was for me. It was a hobby. I wanted to be an actress very much. And so I still honestly struggle with it a bit. It's not a passion. I think to get into the creative fields, any creative field, music, dancing, painting, you do need a bit of passion in it, because the rejection rate of, you know, it's not like you go to work 9 to 5, you get a salary, so you see that salary and you're like, okay, I hate this, but at least I'm getting this, right? And I think writing in some respects is the hardest one, because unlike singing, unlike acting and stuff, you're not out there, you know. You can't just grab a guitar, go to the park and start singing, and people would gather and clap and stuff. You know, by the time you've finished a story, you've written a novel, it takes a year, 2 years for anyone to really even see it publicly and stuff. And then it's a very private thing in many ways. So it's a different medium. So unless you have a passion for any of these creative arts, and given what is required of you, because of the nature of these trades, the rejection stuff is horrible in this. It can take a lot out of you. So if you're not doing it out of passion or because you really want to, but I don't know, like I often say, writing almost chose me. And I appreciate it now. I think there are a few things that made me realize why perhaps I did start writing. One definitely was what I say in my TEDx talk. You know, when I called my father a writer, I was like, if he is a writer, what the hell am I? You know. Second was I was giving this other speech. I was giving a keynote talk, and in it I bought out Umrao. And I suddenly realized, you know, maybe what made me want to be an actress after watching Umrao. Because why didn't I want to be an actress after watching Sholay or after watching Amar Akbar Anthony, you know, or more of the dhamaka movies, more of the, what should we call it, you know, the fun, those sort of silly movies. Why was it this socially, you know, this Umrao Jan or Smita Patel or Shabana Azmi movies? What was it about their movies that made me want to act? And I had an epiphany, and I realized, oh, maybe it wasn't acting. Maybe it was the social justice, the social aspects of these films. And I thought this was how you tell these stories. You know, you become an actress, and this is how you are able to tell the world about these stories or show these stories. And, you know, because I think when I shifted to writing, I also realized that when you're an actress, you're telling other people's stories. But when you're a writer, or when you're the creative person doing the writing, the script writer or whatever, it's your story. And I think there was so much agency and choice taken away from me growing up, my entire life in many respects, that the ability to make the choices and decisions for my characters on the page, I think that just stayed with me somehow, you know. I mean, I don't know, all these things, why did I become a writer? Maybe it was meant to be, I don't know. But all of this did, you know, yes, I can't say that, well, I was in the 3rd grade and I was in the 3rd grade, and I would write stories, and my stories would gather a lot of praise, but it didn't make me say I want to be a writer now, like a lot of writers say, you know, that they knew from an early age they want to write. It wasn't the same with me. And even now, sometimes it's a hard career. It's a very, very hard career. It's just because there's writing and then there's publishing. So it's not just that, oh, I like writing, so I'm going to scribble my diary entries or whatnot. It's a craft. You have to learn how to tell a good story. You know, what does that mean? What is a good story? So there's so much that goes into it. You know, often I sometimes think people think, oh, our diary, you know, sometimes people just think, that's memoir maybe, but even then you need to learn how to tell that. So yeah.
So you just mentioned about the social aspect being interesting to you, right? So in your book, one of the things I really liked was that you talked about a lot of issues that a whole range of issues that women face, right? So it's crimes, burdensome expectations, then expectations about how their body should be, or about how they should dress, all those stereotypical notions of what feminine attractiveness is supposed to be, or stereotypes about which woman is marriageable material. And you've brought in characters who are just challenging these stereotypes, right? Whether it's in terms of dressing or hair length or body type. So just I just wanted to know whether you can relate with any of these women on a personal level. Right?
All of them. In fact,
Yeah.
Kitty is me. I think the
Kitty.
most
I was wondering.
people sometimes ask, who do you relate to more? I mean, I relate to different aspects of all of them.
Right.
Alice, definitely. People when people love Alice, that's great. There's some people who are like, oh my God, Alice is too much, and I'm like, okay. But there's a lot of bit. Alice is a stickler for telling the truth.
Right.
She's what is called a cycle breaker when I think it comes to intergenerational trauma. She stands up to not just her mother or her family, but her society also, in not listening and not conforming. She's a non-conformist. And I think I brought a lot of myself to her personality in that respect. Kitty, definitely, when it comes to weight and stuff, I'm not a petite person. And that comes with its own issues, especially in a culture where people have no filter and no politeness and are very, very rude and let you know exactly what they think of your skin, your hair, your body shape, your everything, and and if you tell them that you're comfortable with the way you look and everything, it's the whole aspect of what it means to be body positive is very interesting in a culture which is more show, sometimes on top, rather than actually interested in making any changes, really, because now that it is the fashion to say, oh yes, every body shape is okay, but still send your daughter to the gym every day, right, whether she wants to or not, it's and the nuances in that, I think, when there are many nuances between what people say and what people do, and I tried to show that in Unmarriageable also. Kitty, all of the characters in a little way are me. But I think Kitty and I mean, everything Kitty hears in the book about her being fat and stuff, I have actually heard. These are things that have been said to me. In fact, I didn't put in the more interesting things because I thought no one would believe it. Getting fitted for a sari blouse and the tailor looking at one of my relatives who had gone with me, and the tailor and the relative laughing hysterically because my fat was popping out from the sari blouse. These two people have nothing in common. This relative would never look at the tailor in any other circumstance, but they're bonding over the fact that I am very fat, but I want to wear a sari blouse. So, little things like this, it's these, I think that I want to say I think they're funny. They are funny. I mean, I think they're ridiculous. That's why they're funny. Like, really, I'm going to die of shame because this idiotic relative and the tailor are having, if anything, I thought that this is great. This is someone from a very elite background and someone from a different socioeconomic background. They're having a moment. And how blessed and lucky am I to be able to have provided this moment of their bonding over Baji is very fat. Why is she wearing a sari? So, so it's always good to give a positive spin to people who think that they're making you feel less than or whatever, because, what else do you do, right? That's what you do.
What a perspective you had over this thing, right?
It's true. I was so amused. I remember standing there and they're both laughing. Literally, they're looking at each other, laughing. And I was like, seriously, my first thought was not that they're laughing at me. I'm fat. Okay, who cares? But I was like, for me, it was like, oh my God, this is really maybe great, good. Look at what a service I've done. My fat has come in use to connect two people. So yeah, why not?
Yeah, I also personally like the character of Kitty. I'm also not really slim, so
No, it's not. Why should someone be slim? Look, the thing is that we are all body types, okay?
Yeah.
And as South Asian body type, sometimes we are a little heavier due to our genetics and things. Every body type, some people are tall, some are short, some are whatever. But this thing about being slim and whatnot, these are such silly things. Yes, I believe one should be healthy. If your blood work is okay and everything, that's great. Don't change your diet, eat the samosas. But if your blood work is not good, something to look into. But as to should you fit into this size, and should, like I remember I did a little bit of modeling in Pakistan. And I was willing to, go out and exercise like a fool 24 hours a day for that, because it was I hated it. I hated modeling. Just too much time in the chair getting makeup on and walking up and down. I don't like it. But the thing is that in my daily life, I mean, I will work out and I will eat for health. I'm not being paid to look a certain way. And I'm not interested, like I say in Unmarriageable also, I think Alice does what, I'm not interested in being slim or looking a certain way so that other women look at me and die of jealousy. That is not my purpose on earth. Right? Or so sometimes it does come down to that. Of course, one wants to look good and presentable and stuff, but I think we should all, it would be good to be comfortable with how we all look. Now, that's easier said than done. I know there are a lot of pressures, not just in society, but sometimes internal pressures also. We've all been conditioned, and especially those of us from certain eras. And I think women nowadays, hopefully those growing up in these new, in this generation, new generations will have more choices and more ability to not conform to certain idiotic standards, which, I mean, if I cannot be 5'10" for the life of me, I'm 5'4". So, this whole, I mean, it's so silly, right? So if one takes that and fixes it to a body shape or stuff, it's so silly that everyone must be this size and look this way and everything. It's just so silly. So yeah, you can see Kitty here and Alice also.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, of course, I can see that Alice and Kitty are characters you like, but and I think in the original you like Charlotte Lucas, right? So
she's actually. Yeah, go on.
I was just saying that I want to understand your reasons for liking her, and also who's your favorite in your own retelling.
Charlotte Lucas is actually probably my favorite in all of the Austen novels. Reason being that, like I said, when I first read Charlotte, because it seemed like Pakistani society to me, we always say that Elizabeth Bennet and Alice are the, they're the bold ones and they don't care about anything. And Alice goes to Netherfield, to the Bingleys' house with her skirts muddied and she doesn't care about what people think. But Charlotte is the same way. Charlotte, in the world of Pride and Prejudice, she's an older woman, she's bypassed her marriage age according to 200 years ago in Regency England. She's not very pretty. She doesn't have a lot of money. She doesn't have any of the things which would make someone marry her, right? And she doesn't want, she's a smart person. Charlotte Lucas is she's a smart girl. She doesn't necessarily want, she knows what her fate will be. She's going to be one of those spinster aunts, literally, who go from who babysit her brother's children, and she's going to be happy with that. She wants more. And when she sees Mr. Collins, and when she sees that Elizabeth has refused Mr. Collins, she thinks, the wonderful thing I thought about Charlotte Lucas even back then was, when you're a teenager, which is what I was when I read it, and you're suddenly interested in boys or movies or actors and stuff like that, peer pressure and what your friends think can be so strong, like you're constantly on the phone, this guy's cute and this guy said this, what do you think? What do you think? I mean, one of the most frequently, I think, perhaps, I don't know now, but back when I was growing up was, you ask your friends, what do you think? What do you think? And Charlotte Lucas, of course, she's older, but she doesn't do that. She has a mind of her own, Yes, her friend said no to Mr. Collins. Fine, he's not suitable for her friends, but he's a suitable boy for her boy. and I loved that Austen. This is what I loved about Austen. These little things which were so true to to what I was seeing, what I was observing myself, because in Pride and Prejudice, she says Charlotte Lucas accidentally meets Mr. Collins in the street, but she doesn't meet him accidentally. She sees him, she goes running to the street to meet him, so she doesn't accidentally. She's orchestrated the whole meeting, and then in the next line, suddenly she's engaged to him. So I was always so curious, what happened between accidentally meeting, and now they're engaged? Like, did he propose in the same way? What did she say? So I was so curious about that always. So when it came to doing my own retelling, I wanted to fill in the blanks. I wanted to give Charlotte a bigger life. A lot of times in contemporary worlds and in cultures which are not in cultures which have perhaps moved on from the more traditional understanding of marriages and practicalities and stuff, Charlotte's decision is often seen as very foolish, and that, she's, look at who she married and she would be better married off. No, without having gotten married, not in some cultures and not in that time period. She did a very smart thing for herself. And I wanted to show how she did that. In fact, the only person in the novel who is referred to, and Charlotte refers to it herself, as a gold digger, which is such a bad word today. Charlotte refers to herself as a gold digger, and I wanted to ask people what I wanted to push the readers' ideas about what it meant to gold dig. I mean, we think of it as someone who is trying to marry the richest person possible, but she hasn't married, she hasn't married some super jet setter, whatever. And yet someone can refer to her as a gold digger because she's marrying for his passport, British passport, his lifestyle, his whatever, because she knows that's going to help her family, which is what a lot of girls in these cultures do. And often it's part of their, when they're thinking of why they want to marry someone, they're marrying a family, they're marrying a status. Now, whether I don't want to say I endorse any of this. I actually don't, but the skill of a novelist is to present many scenarios and have the reader decide what they believe is, for themselves, is something that they could live with or not live with, which often determines how people think of characters, also who becomes people's favorite characters. But in Pride and Prejudice, when Charlotte tells Elizabeth she's marrying him, Elizabeth says, how can you do that? Charlotte doesn't say, okay, I won't, and all right, you're right. She is very strong. She's like, no, he's good for me. It's a good step for me. And she does. And at the end of Pride and Prejudice, Charlotte is actually pregnant. And in Regency fiction, I believe that was a way to show that it's a prosperous marriage. It's a good marriage. She's having a child. Something is coming out of them. So that's what I wanted to reflect in Unmarriageable also, that Charlotte for herself has made a very smart decision. So Charlotte for me is just as strong and just as feminist and just as amazing as Elizabeth is, even from the first time I read it. So.
Yeah. So in your book, who's your favorite?
I think they are all, I like them all. I mean, I don't have any favorites in my book.
They're all yours.
They're all mine, yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I like them all. I'm sick of them all. I don't like them all sometimes. It depends. Yeah. I mean, I have favorite moments in the book. I think one of when Mrs. Bennet says stuff, I really enjoyed writing that. I enjoyed writing Colleen, Mr. Collins. I really enjoyed Bina de Bagh, who's Catherine de Bourgh, the parallel of her. I really enjoyed the last conversation between her and Alice when prostitutes come up. I enjoyed a lot of moments. I really enjoyed writing the dinner scene when Mrs. Bennet and Charlotte's mother, Sherry's mother, in Unmarriageable, Bobia, they're arguing over whether it's better whether a woman should cook and that makes her marriageable, or whether a woman should know how to order a cook and that makes her marriageable. So I really enjoyed writing those nuances and those sort of things. So I have some favorite scenes in the novel because of that. But I like them all. And I hope the reader likes them all. I hope the reader even likes the characters they don't like and they're not supposed to like. So.
I like that dramabazi of Mrs. Bennet, right? When Alice just refuses to marry Colleen, and the extent to which she goes to indulge in melodrama, that was just really hilarious. But it's also, I think we have seen characters of those kinds in our own lives. So that made it funnier and relatable.
Which is why I find your use of the word melodrama very interesting and telling, because it is melodrama, right? I mean, but I have literally seen women. This was nothing. What I showed Mrs. Bennett doing is, honestly, I've seen things which no one would believe. Literally beating their chest, pulling their hair out, going on a hunger strike like fucker for a week if their daughters don't say yes. And, so much emotional blackmailing, like, for instance, come on, I wanted to be an actress. The first thing I'm told, your father will die of a heart attack. What else is that? I mean, you can call it melodrama, but it actually happened to me, So, I don't see anything in Unmarriageable as melodrama. All the stupid things Kitty hears about being fat, I have heard. I have all the things Mrs. Bennett has done, I have seen in some way, shape or form. Everything, none of this novel, it is made up, of course, it's from my imagination, but it is completely based on cultural fact and what happens in a lot of households. We see the bride sitting nicely on the stage on her makeups, looking down, or these days looking up and smiling, but still very demure. So we don't know how much emotional blackmail and stress she had behind the scenes to get to that moment, right? So that's the stuff I wanted to write about, and I like to write about, even in my essays, and to expose and whatnot, which is, we see the superficial, shallow, we see the Facebook pictures in today's terms. We don't see, what how much there's a lot of emotional stress and pressure in our cultures to just marry anyone sometimes, I mean, Alice doesn't want to get married. In the beginning of Unmarriageable, Alice she wants to. Alice is not against marriage. I think this is very foolish when people say feminists are against marriage. No one is against marriage. They just want to marry someone who they can respect, not only someone who will respect them, but they can respect also, which is what Alice wants. She wants to marry someone who she has an intellectual bonding with, not just because, oh, Darcy's rich or so-and-so is rich, so therefore I'll have a good time. Alice is not like that. I'm not like that. So Alice is not like that. And she wants someone who she will be intellectually happy with, who she will be emotionally happy with. Those things are important to her. So it's not that she doesn't want to get married. It's just that the men she sees around her, she doesn't think there's anyone like that, which is why she says, and that comes out such as, I don't want to get married. I don't want. So it's not that she doesn't. She ends up marrying someone who she thinks she'll have that compatibility that she's seeking with. But, if she was a little less who she is, her mother she would have ended up marrying Carleen. How many girls end up marrying people like Carleen because they have to settle, they're getting older, their mothers have gone on a hunger strike or have cried their eyes out, and everyone is saying, you'll be happy, just, you'll be happy. And some girls do end up happy. Again, it depends on personality. There's so much. We who come from these cultures know a lot of the nuances. So yeah, sure, melodrama, but no melodrama. These things happen in a lot, too many houses, too many homes and houses.
Yes. One thing I felt when I was reading your book, I've mentioned that in my review as well. I was wondering about the choice of names, because I think because the plot is running parallelly, right, with the original, I think it's really easy for somebody to figure out who the character is. So but what was your motivation for keeping the names so similar? Because I felt some of them, at least to me, they ended up sounding a bit awkward, like, when I tried to pronounce them. So just wanted to know your thoughts about the choice of names.
Sure. So nothing in this novel was by chance. Everything is very consciously selected by me. Number one, I will say this was, I wrote this novel very quickly. I had a deadline of 3 months to write it. So whatever came into my mind, I just put that down. That said, I could have fixed it, but Pakistan is a very small society. It's a very small country. And given the social class that I'm writing about, that is even smaller. For some reason in my mind, I didn't want to do, there are a million Mariam Khans and Fatmas and Aishas and Zainabs and just, I know a lot of them. I didn't want to give names in Unmarriageable to, I didn't want to give the sort of names where someone from my class fellows would say, is she writing about me? Is she writing about, I was very conscious of that because it's a very small society. And I didn't want to get, I just didn't want to fall into that particular bubble that she has, and I think my way of distancing myself was giving names which are not Pakistani names per se, and also matching with, as much as I could with Austen's names. But that was one of the reasons for sure. But of course, like Valentine is not a Pakistani name, but in the novel I give a reason for why it is, right? His mother liked Rudolph Valentino. Same thing happened to Oprah. So the reason he ends up getting named Valentine is in the novel. But also the fact is that Darcy seems to be too many people's Valentines, right? When they think of the man they want to be with, it's Dad. So this was my in-joke to me that here you go, here's your Valentine, Same with Lady, Lady is not a Pakistani name, but in the novel, I give a reason, she watches this cartoon Lady and the Tramp and she's she decides to name herself Lady. But also Jane Austen for the longest time she never published with her own name. Her first book was published by a lady and, and that was my inch. So for those who are familiar with Austen, her life, her books, these were my Easter eggs, in the novel, like the man who proposed to Austen and then she said no, she said yes at the nighttime and no in the morning. That person is in here also. So, these little things were in there. So, but the other thing is I actually, in the paperback version, you're usually asked to put more things in the paperback version. So the only essay that went into the hardback one was the one that you mentioned, why I wrote this novel. But in the paperback version, there's a note on all the names of every single name, why Mrs. Bennet is named Pinky, why Colleen is Colleen, why all of them have the names. And then there's also this other essay, how Dalipabad got its name, because Dalipabad is a made-up fictional city in Pakistan also. And I wanted the freedom of that. But how do you know, it comes from Dilip Kumar. But how is this Indian actor, how is this city, in this town in Pakistan getting this Indian actor's name and why and how did that happen? So that essay is there too. Unfortunately, I will say my British publishers, the red copy you have, decided not to include these two essays. I don't know why. Maybe they thought there'd be no interest in them, which might tell us who they thought the audience would be. But I think a lot of audience would have been very interested even in the UK, even in England. And since the book was since the UK version is what ended up in the Indian subcontinent in India, Pakistan, etc., I think these two essays would have been a wonderful inclusion in the red in that. I mean, I think readers would, you wouldn't be asking me this question had you read the essay in there, right? And I think, but unfortunately, I could not get them to put it in. So that was that. So if you ever get hold of this, you can read it in that, or I might even, I don't know, we'll see. but yeah, there's an entire essay on why each and every character is named the name they have. It's not a fluke. And I'm very comfortable and happy with the names. I know a lot of people are like, well, why aren't they this? Why aren't they this? And because I didn't want Aisha Khan from my class saying, did you write about me? So I wanted that distance for myself also in order to just, write what I wanted to write without censoring myself in any way or feeling I needed to censor. I wouldn't censor anything, but, just some degree of removal. So, because I felt this is such a part of the culture. This is such a desi cultural South Asia. I've had readers from Bangladesh. They've reviewed the book in Bangladesh. I get so many messages from Bangladeshi readers, Bengali readers across India, Indian readers. Often Indian readers are like, oh, we didn't realize that Pakistan was so much like India. And I'm like, this is so interesting and strange to me because there's so much overlap between the cultures with Sri Lankan readers, actually across the world. I've had readers from Nigeria, Norway, France, Germany, Japan, everywhere. Honestly, so many people who have written and said, oh my God, this is just like us. This is just like my family. I'm like, you are all Pakistani. Welcome. So, yeah.
Yeah, so like you said about the similarity in culture, we actually, my family and I, we love watching Pakistani serials. So, so we are Punjabi, so there are a lot of them, where they have Punjabi accents and Punjabi diction and style. And so we say, there's the same kind of expressions, the same kind of style of talking, the same kind of pronunciation that, the way we do. So it's like, just you don't feel any difference, the same kind of characters, same kind of like everything. So we really enjoy watching these serials. And,
No, one of my Pakistani reviewers, she wrote a review in Dawn, and she actually, instead of Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan, she said Pride and Prejudice in Punjab, which because it is in Punjab. I mean, it does go to the different provinces. It goes to Sindh and it goes to other cities in Pakistan. But yes, predominantly the world does take place in Punjab. So I can see why you would make that connection. That said, I have to say a lot of Pakistani dramas I find very foolish and very silly. They're perpetuating a lot of patriarchy, a lot of sexism, a lot of, even the ones that are coming out. There are some lovely ones that are coming out today. I can't sit through a lot of them. The ones that I grew up watching, such as, I forget the names now. I don't have them written down. But Hasina Moin's dramas when I was growing up, Tanhaiya, those sort of things, they're very lovely. But the ones that in the more recently in the past 10, 20 years and stuff have been coming up, they're very poisonous. The few ones that I like, there's one called Udari, which I really recommend. That's wonderful. There's another one I recently watched called Dil Nadan To Nahi. That is very good also. There's one called Do Raha, which I really enjoyed. So there are a few nice ones out there, but usually the ones that are like the ones available on Netflix, they're just silly. They seem to be about rich guys and lower middle class girls and how they come together as long as you're pure and good and you're not, they just fit certain stereotypes and they're just not for me. If one enjoys them, that's great, but I find them very regressive when it comes to, I recently finished watching this very silly drama. I don't even know why I sat through it, but it was called Jhuti. And it was about this girl who just lies and causes trouble all the time. And it was, I don't know what it was trying to say, that women are liars or troublemakers, or I don't know. It was so silly. There was no redeeming factor to it. I think I kept watching it just to see if it's going to redeem itself, if it's going to show any degree of the girl learning from her mistakes or something. And the protagonist, there was nothing there. I was really appalled. After that, I am just not interested in watching, unless it comes to me recommended by at least 4 or 5 very trusted friends or people. I'm not interested in watching a lot of Pakistani dramas. They're very regressive and they're incredibly silly, very, very, very poisonous sometimes.
Yes, some of them I also did find regressive. Like I remember there was one which I found disturbing. In fact, I can't recall the name. I think it was called Incar. I did not.
That name alone says everything.
Yeah. So I think I did not like that one because it, so there's this woman and this guy, rich guy, like you said, is pursuing her, and she's from she's from a lower middle class family, and there's this rich guy who's like madly in love with her, and he just wants her, regardless of the fact whether she wants to be his. So on her wedding day, he actually attacks her with a pair of scissors. So that I found that one really disturbing.
Yeah,
but
there was a recent one in which there's just no nuance. There's this girl apparently she's supposed to be extremely beautiful, and she marries this lower middle class guy who's got a government job and he doesn't want to do anything else, but she's not very happy with her income. Instead of her going to get a job or something or the other, or showing those complexities, she falls in love with a rich guy who seduces her, gets her things. She does get a job, but somehow it's so silly. But her husband slaps her and calls her, you know, not nice things. And there's no discussion that this is a culture where usually women from the class that they're showing don't necessarily go out and get a job. It's not even considered good to work per se. You're supposed to be a homemaker and be with the kids and stuff. And you know, there's no nuance to any of that stuff. It was a very disturbing drama, actually, when I watched it on several levels, you know, and everything comes down between the bad women who don't learn to live within their means and conform and stuff, and the good women who accept everything just as it is, and very, very foolish drama. In fact, someone did a review where they said that, you know, where this was really interesting for me. Someone did a review or an article in Friday Times, Pakistani publication, where they compared Unmarriageable to that drama. I think it was, I forget what that drama was. What was it? Which was called? I forget. But it, you know, and seeing those two, I mean, it was interesting for me because I was seeing, you know, she had nice things to say about Unmarriageable, thankfully, and then comparing it to this regressive drama, which she was like, we need to stop making these silly dramas. And it was interesting to see that. So I think there is definitely within the viewing public and stuff, I think some people are sick of these things, you know. They when they read a book like Unmarriageable, when they watch dramas which present nuances and interesting storylines, they appreciate that rather than I think a lot of times people watch these dramas because they're like, you know, sometimes it's the shock factor. It's like, what stupidity is going to happen next? So, you know, but yeah.
But you know, but some of them, like you said, they are regressive. But also, I think compared to the kind of dramas that I used to see when I was a bit younger, I think some of them have become maybe, you know, in little ways, maybe bolder or better, I think. But you know, I was discussing this with my mother one day that, you know, they always so many of these dramas show the daughters as, you know, these you know, what you call particularly daughters of rich families, like, you know, you say bigdi hui ameer zadi, you know, she would just throw tantrums all the time and I want what I want, you know, being absolutely illogical. So I think that's also, like, you know, just playing into those stereotypes of how women are. Like,
yeah, absolutely. It's playing into a lot of silly stereotypes. Often in fact, a lot of my issues with these dramas, even when I was growing up or you know, in the past many years watching them, is how they separate all the bad women and the bad girls are westernized, you know. They do yoga, and they smoke, or they go to parties, or they drink, or they, you know, they wear, they talk in a certain way, and it's just like they're always the villains, you know, they're always the bad. And always the lower middle class girls with the dupatta on their heads, or the, you know, they're wearing Eastern wear, or those are always the good girls, you know. And this is what I wanted to break in Unmarriageable so badly, and I'm so glad I did it, because Alice comes from that rich Beghrivi families, and Sherry comes from the lower middle class, but they are able to cross that divide. They're friends. They're both smoking and sitting in the graveyard. In fact, it's Sherry who is, you know, so I really, really wanted to show that these things we're seeing on TV are just silly stereotypes. This is not, I mean, yes, of course, there's sometimes a little bit to stereotype, but stereotypes are not the final word and the 100, you know, 180 picture or whatever it is of an entire society. And I wanted to break all those things in Unmarriageable, you know, all these cliches that we've gotten used to on TV or otherwise, this good girl, bad girl. What does it mean? If you smoke, are you a bad girl? Are you, and this word bold, what does that even mean? You know, I mean, Sherry's from the lower middle class. She smokes. She says, in fact, Sherry makes the dirty jokes in Unmarriageable. Sherry's because of course people do, right? I mean,
yes.
It's just so silly to do these cliches that we keep seeing on TV. But, you know, I have to say a lot of these things we also, so I remember in the 90s when Star Plus came to Pakistan, and the Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Hai and all of those star plus dramas of mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws started showing in Pakistan. And they were ridiculous. I think sometimes a lot of these new storylines sometimes are influenced by those, because all the daughter-in-laws were horrible. All the mother-in-laws were trying to break up relationships. They were poison. It was pure poison and on the screen. They were very messed up also. So, culturally we have, I think India has now started putting out some wonderful, things out there. I don't watch Indian dramas honestly anymore, but I do. I've grown up on Indian film also. So I watch a lot of Indian films. There's lots of lovely intellectual stuff out there. I mean, one of my favorite recent films, not so recent, but still, is Luck by Chance. I adore anything Farhan Akhtar and Zoya Akhtar put out there. I'm a big fan of their work. I like their work a lot. I like Amir Khan's work a lot. I think Dangal was wonderful. Movies like that. For someone who looked at Umrao Jan and wanted to join the film industry, those are my tastes generally. So I'm so glad I'm in a world now where there's such fantastic movies out there that we can see on streaming and otherwise. But yeah, those Star Plus dramas, are they still there? They were horrible. And then these Pakistani dramas, which sort of, did the same sort of cliched foolishness and stuff that, Western women are terrible, Westernized women are terrible, and that, these dichotomies do not exist. We all, and even the whole thing about Western and Eastern, there's nothing feminist about Western cultures per se. Mm-hmm. When you look at Hindu goddesses, when you look at in Islam, the wives of the prophets, etc., when you go to even pagan times, if we look at the archetypes of even Greek goddesses and stuff, even Jane Austen 200 years ago was a feminist. So I wanted to break a lot of those things and tab. I wanted people to read Unmarriageable. I wanted them to see themselves in these characters, in this culture. Alice goes to run in a park. People run in parks in Pakistan. They go to watch theatre. People go to this, this is, and it's not just I had to showcase Pakistan. I wanted to write the Pakistan I've grown up in, which so many people live in, across cultural class distinctions. Sometimes people tend to write, especially if you're coming from an English language background, about one class or so. But I wanted to show that there's even in Pakistan, there are many different Pakistans, Right. And I have to say, it was interesting to me that people from a Pakistani background in the US and UK who have read Unmarriageable, they will write to me and they'll say, but are you sure parties happen in Pakistan? I'm like, yes, maybe not in your Pakistan, but in this, so there's several, like even with India, all India is not uniform. They're different, there's Sonam Kapoor's India and there is, someone else's India. So they're in the US, in every country, all places have a million places within them, So I wanted to show that with Pakistan. So yeah, and it's been an absolute. It's been a thrilling ride to see how many people across the world and different cultures Unmarriageable has resonated with. I mean, I wasn't expecting such a reception. Maybe because you don't think that far. You write a book and then you hope someone will read it, 4 people, but as beloved as it's become, it seems to me. I know people who will tell me they've read it 4 times in a row, but that is a lot to read one book. But there's something in it which seems to touch a nerve for a lot of people across the age barrier, across different countries, nationalities and stuff. And it's been lovely. It's been really gratifying, and it's been lovely. It's ongoing loveliness. So yeah.
Yes. So you've already gotten so much praise and acclaim for this book, but personally, for you as a writer, how do you visualize success? Like, what is your vision for success, and what gives you the most satisfaction?
As a writer is one thing, and what is a successful life is a different thing. I cannot I think it's important to separate the two. It's important to separate one's success in life versus one's success in one's profession, because that's what I see writing as, right? It is a job at the end of the day, like any other. Sure, it's not a 9 to 5. Whether I never write again or not, it won't be the end of the world. Unlike people who do have to go to a 9 to 5, you know, I don't want to. I want to make that differentiation, but I think as a writer, everyone perhaps has their success is so weird in writing. You know, what does it mean to be successful? Does it mean to write a good story? But if that book or story is never published, is that success too? Or should success just be the fact that you've written something which has given you satisfaction? If you do end up getting published, are you unsuccessful if no one reads your books, or it doesn't sell 1 million copies, or movies aren't made and everyone doesn't love it? Does that mean it's not successful? Or is it successful just because 3 people read it and loved it? You know, so the definition of what successful writer means to me, I've been writing since seriously. I mean, I've always been writing storytelling, but I decided, I got married in 1996 and moved to the US. I'd come to college to the US, met my husband here and got married, and we were moving around a lot. And I said, you know, let me just try writing, you know, let me just give it a shot. Because we were moving around a lot. So I've been writing for so many years now. I've seen so much rejection, ongoing rejection. Oftentimes the things I write about don't seem to find an audience for whatever reason in the publishing world. So my definition of successful and what it's not is you know, it's not as clear cut. I don't know what it means to be a successful writer, honestly. As far as a successful life, I think sometimes a successful life is, we are not born in isolation. We're born into families, we're born into cultures, into countries, into religions. I want to say that a successful life is one where you have no regrets, or as few regrets as possible. Sometimes that's not up to us. I think if you are born into a family and a culture where you are allowed to make your own choices, then I think it's easier to live with any regrets you have, or it's easier to live with your decisions because you made them. When you have not been allowed to make them, and if that changes your life in a way that is not as fulfilling, or you still have regrets, then is that really a successful life? I don't know. You know, I don't know. It's you know, you can still be happy and content and stuff, but you know, so for instance, this might sound perhaps a bit silly, but you know, my kids wanted a dog when they were very young. Keeping a dog in the US is, you know, you have to feed him, feed the dog, take the dog. It was a lot of work. There's you know, but it was such a small, you know, I wanted to bring my kids up with the least amount of regrets that they could have. And I didn't want them to grow up and say, we never had a dog, and what if we'd had a dog? It was such a small, you know, in the scheme of things, what was it? So I don't know, maybe that's a successful life. I've tried to give my kids as few regrets.
Yeah. Right. So, okay. So coming back to your work, do we get to see another Austen retelling? Is that on your agenda?
You know, I don't know. I wrote Unmarriageable. Yes, an homage. It is an homage in many respects, but it was very much done with a post-colonial intention. You know, I wanted to take back the land. I mean, had British Empire not come in, maybe English is not the language I would be speaking. Maybe I would be able to read Urdu, or authors who had written about things which were more topics based in a culture which was more familiar to me, right? Bonnets were not something I grew up wearing, but around me people were wearing dupattas and, you know, and stuff like that. And So, you know, I wanted to, for me, Unmarriageable was very much post-colonial, taking back culture, writing back to empire, that sort of thing. It wasn't just a fun project, which was why it was so intimidating for me to write it, because it wasn't just fun. It wasn't just, oh, I love Pride and Prejudice, I love Austen, I love this, I love that, let me do this. It wasn't that at all. And when you're doing a parallel thing like this, I think it's the first parallel retelling of its kind. There was no template for me to look at, and I was very intimidated by whether I'd be successful. You know, back to successful. I think it's been a successful. What I did with it, I feel I've done justice to it. So in that respect, I feel I've been successful with Unmarriageable, definitely. But you know, so I didn't sit down to, you know, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to do this, then I'll do this book, because it wasn't like that for me. However, like I said, the love I have received for this novel by people who read Austen and people who have never read Austen also, never, and they still, you know, I don't know. I mean, will I ever do another Austen retelling or anything of the sort? Never say never, right? But the thing is, I did this as a parallel retelling. I don't know if I, you know, so this had a very fixed idea of why I was telling this story. If I was to ever do another retelling, it would have to, you know, I'd have to have some reason for putting myself, for doing. So who knows? I mean, I don't know. Never say never. We'll see. Yeah.
So anything else you'd like to share, or any message you can give to girls and women to, you know, continue pursuing their dreams?
Yeah, I mean, you're living in a different world today than 60s, 70s, 80s. You have so many options and avenues open to you. If you really want to do something, please don't care whether because of your decision someone else will get married or not get married. Like I was told, your sister won't get married, your cousins will get divorced. It seemed to me that if I became an actress, no one in Pakistan would get married. It was so ridiculous. But you don't know any better, right? And we didn't have the internet in those days. All you knew was the world you were living in. So I really thought that, oh my God, if I do this, then, you know, I don't know, the world will collapse or something. You know, believe in yourself. Everyone will survive. And if they don't survive, that's their problem. It's not your problem. You know, at the end of the day, what you don't want to do is be in an interview and have tears coming down your eyes. You don't want to do that. you don't want to do that. So if you can live your life so that you don't end up doing that, that's the best gift you can give yourself. You know, really, gifts are not just what others give you. Gifts are what you give yourself also. And if you give yourself the dream in believing in you, create your own regrets, man. Don't let anyone else ever create any regrets for you. Create your own regrets. You can live with your regrets, but you can't. It's very hard to live with the regrets. Even if it's your parents or your siblings or your friends or whatever, it's very hard to live with regrets that are there because of your culture or others have given you and stuff. Because, you know, at least for a person like me, maybe there's some people who can be fine with that, live with that, whatever. But, you know, when you're someone like me who doesn't like to be told what to do, to live with those is rough. You know, and of course, now people say now that now you can become an actress, you can do this, you can do that. The difference is this: when you are young, and it does matter sometimes, at least to me, when you are young and passionate, you believe that failure is not an option, right? Or you can swallow failure. When you're older and you know what the risks and everything are, and you're tired and you're whatever, it's a little harder. It's a little harder, you know? So like I said, it's back then there were knocks on my door and offers made to me. Now I would have to knock on someone's door, and it's a different thing. And you know, in the scheme of things, it sounds so small, right? That, oh, poor thing, she wanted to be an actress and do a TV drama, because now so many people do it. It's become so much, it's become okay to do it. So it's not a big deal. So sometimes I'm like, look at my poor little dream. It sounds so small, but it was still a dream, right? And it wasn't allowed to happen. So yeah, if I have any message for anyone, including my kids, live your own life. Don't let anyone choose your regrets for you, even if it's your parents. No one's that important. Only you are important.
Right. Thank you for sharing such an important and strong message. And thank you so much, Soniah ji, for your time. It was just really amazing talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And do check out the book Unmarriageable, Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan. The Amazon links for the book are there in the description box. Also, I'm adding the link for my review on the book. Do check that out as well. And if you enjoyed watching this video, please do like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm available on Twitter, Instagram. So please do follow me and get to know more about the world of Unmarriageable and my world too. Thank you, Ronika, again.
Thank you so much.